Hello, hello. Okay. All right, you guys, I have my glasses on today. I'm so we're on the eve of a Gemini full moon, and it's really giving that because I have been in a total frenzy in a fun way, but it's feeling very Gemini over here. For example, I have not really left my apartment today because I have been in what feels like a productive trance, but in a very Gemini way where I've been upgrading my website. I spent hours joyfully reworking my website, choosing a new design, going in between lots of color palettes. Gemini is very tab surfing energy, and that's what it was giving all day because I just kept giving myself permission to play and change my mind, which I'm still very much in the process of. But if you look at my personal Instagram and the stars Instagram, we have totally cleaned up all of the highlight icons. We created new, really user friendly, professional looking, aesthetically coherent bios, not bios, like links, it's like link in bio and you click and then there's all of the links that you can access with ease. And it looks good because I'm a Taurus rising. And yeah, so hello. Greetings, greetings, greetings. I am your host, Isa Nakazawa. Wow, my full name is a lot for you guys. I'm the host of Stars and Stars with Isa, hence my light box. I never know how to, there we go. There we go. And we do these weekly Wednesday YouTube lives to connect with listeners, answer questions, cosmic questions that I receive in my DMs from all of you that I love and look forward to so much. And I give some astrology forecasts for the month. I did decide I'm going to break it up because I do feel like sometimes the astrology gets a little overwhelming and dense. And to do an entire monthly forecast is a little ambitious in a way that is not helpful for our Gemini moon brain. So I'm just going to focus on the first half of December, but mostly this week and a little bit of next week because that's what's coming up. And there's basically two distinct astrological vibes of the month. So why don't we just talk and focus on the first half and then we do these every week so next week we can worry about the second half of December. Um I feel like an educator where I'm like, does that sound good? And of course none of you can speak. So, but you can use the chat function, which I love so much. So please use the chat function to introduce yourselves and to interact and engage because that's what makes this so fun for me. And it's fun to also know like where everyone's dialing in from. And then the last thing I will say before I jump into some astrology is so I don't know for my fellow streaming nerds out there or my DJs or my friends, whoever's listening. Noor, hi Noor. Um, I used to do during the pandemic, I had a radio show in Oakland for like over a decade or maybe under a decade, 8 years. And then during the pandemic, I learned how to stream on OBS so that I could play music. That was when we all had 10 new hobbies during the pandemic. I was a barista, a DJ, and I was obsessed with jump rope, which everything about what I was into during COVID had to do with keeping time because we were all slowly losing our minds. So, anyways, I learned how to DJ the proper way on the controller. Shout out. And I think me and like hundreds of millions of other people did. We all became DJs, and I taught myself OBS, which is this open source streaming software that I love. And with OBS, it allows you to create all these overlays. So I could put the stars logo and I could show you when I'm doing my lives the current chart or the different charts of the month so that you can have a visual, which I think is really helpful when thinking about how to understand astrology. It's just nice because we're all visual learners. I'm pretty sure a significant number of us. So, anyways, I downloaded OBS and I played with it for an hour and a half before going live today. And I decided not to use it today and to just not be completely Gemini moon frenzy and wait for next week when I have spent a little bit more time perfecting it. So that's something to look forward to in the coming YouTube lives is we're going to be streaming through OBS and we're going to be using the overlays so that I can actually show you all what the chart looks like of the astrology as we're discussing it. And I think that'll be a really helpful teaching tool too, so that I can kind of help walk through the oppositions and the squares and kind of like yeah, just kind of like help you all follow along with what we as astrologers are actually looking at in the sky and how we use the graphs and diagrams. So if that sounds good, it's on the way. One thing about me is I'm an overachiever and I will do it whether I'm getting paid or not. You dig? Which actually is kind of the vibe of the December astrology that I want to talk about because we're really in a season that is so significant for all of my mutable rising and my mutable heavy charts. And remember, what are mutable placements? They are the signs that transition seasons. They are Sagittarius and Gemini, and Pisces and Virgo. And these signs are the signs of the double bodied archetypes. They are the signs of the liminal. They are the adapters and shapeshifters of the zodiac. They are here to teach us lessons of movement and surrender and playfulness and tricksterdom and how to be everything everywhere all at once. That is their gift. And it is also that is their medicine and it's also their shadow. Like all signs have both. So they are the main characters for right now. There's some other supporting characters that we will talk about. But yeah, I just if you are a Sag, Pisces, Gemini, or Virgo rising, wow, I really want to hear from you in the comments. Obviously, so many people listen to this after it's been recorded. So I'm speaking to y'all. And even if you're a fixed or cardinal rising, but you have significant mutable placements, I'm so curious how you're all feeling. And I really want to shout out and start with my Pisces risings and Pisces placements because I want to talk a little bit about some context grounding astrology before I bring us to the present day. So again, Saturn, this planet I talk about constantly because I'm obsessed with Saturn. It's the planet that's really far in the solar system. It's the planet that is associated with permanence and endurance. And wherever Saturn is in our chart, it puts us through a kind of restructuring so that we can lay a foundation that will support us for the long haul. Saturn is the grandfather. I don't want to gender it, but it's the grandparent, the wise, sometimes stern grandparent that knows how to save for a rainy day and sees a longer vision. And because they see the longer vision, they know that sometimes today we have to forego pleasures or we have to forego impulsivity in the name of a more enduring and reliable tomorrow. But Saturn, like a lot of the outer planets, has been in retrograde. And retrogrades often pull us inward. And so now, for the last kind of time, Saturn is stationed direct in Pisces, where it's been since around 2023. So this is significant for my mutable risings, my Pisces, my Sag, my Gemini, my Virgos, especially my Pisces risings. This is a final message to all of us, wherever Pisces, whatever house Pisces falls in our chart, carries a final message and a final, like almost portal of maturing. And it's a really interesting moment to reflect on what we've been learning in the house that Pisces falls in our chart. For me, Pisces, for example, falls in the 11th house, which is the 11th house of friendship, hopes and dreams, communities. And I have been having a little bit of a renaissance there. And a couple years ago, I was having my first major friendship conflicts in my adult life. For those of you who don't know me, friendship has always been my safest place. And it's the place which is very Aquarius Mars of me. And it's always been the place where I feel held. And I really rely on friendship in very tangible daily ways for encouragement and for support in the most literal to the most like symbolic ways. And so that period when Saturn started transiting my 11th was the first time that I actually started having conflicts with friends that were really close to me. And in that time, I had to learn how to communicate through, and this is for other people listening, they might be like, really, your first time? Like, this is a big theme in my life. But for me, it hasn't been. And so this was really like a growing up and learning that conflict can be, I mean, Esther Perel talks about this a lot, but conflict can actually lead to deeper connection. And I really, really, really learned that by not skipping steps and by going through it. And that can look like taking space, having a bunch of misunderstandings, having to let go of your ego and be the first one to reach out, still having to have multiple reparative conversations, really holding space to listen to each other, coming to new agreements, then like actually spending time to rebuild that connection. And so now that Saturn is direct in the 11th, I feel like there's so many ways that Saturn taught me how to bring more maturity and responsibility to the 11th house. The 11th house is also your hopes and dreams. And I would definitely put this podcast and all of these like astrological efforts in that camp. And I'm, really putting a lot of effort in the most like mundane, boring ways to make sure that, like, for example, my business, so that my clients can have the most like easeful, intuitive experience from start to finish with me. And so Saturn sometimes teaches us how those little details, and like Mercury and Saturn are very major players in the sky. And I feel like they're both trying to teach us that these kind of like mundane details are really important for like relationships and for caretaking. Like Saturn's, Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, same with Aquarius. And Capricorn's opposite sign is Cancer, ruled by the moon. And when we think of Cancer, we're like, ooh, the caretakers of the zodiac. But if you want to take care of someone, you need good boundaries. You need to exercise accountability and responsibility. And so I think we need to give Capricorns and Saturn credit too for the ways that good boundaries and all of those systems also are gestures of care, of deep care. So think about the places that you're bringing a certain kind of foundation and accountability and effort, labor. Where are you putting your labor? And how is that in the name of taking good care of yourself, of the people you love, of your purpose and the work that you're doing? Because we need that. And somehow it is December, y'all, which is really wild to me. Can we just take a moment to acknowledge this year was very strange too, because for a lot of reasons, but it is wild. I'm still, there's nothing articulate to say about it. I just can't believe. But I will say the front half of this year was slow in certain areas of my life. And then it really sped up after August. And so I'm curious if other people felt like 2025 had different speeds, because I think that's true in general. Like there's different eras and moments in the year. And I feel like when those holidays hit, and I'm a Scorpio, so I have that November birthday, it just accelerates. And that said, I'm really trying to use December to actually intentionally slow down and try and bring more awareness and intention into both reflecting on the lessons um, of this past year and then starting to envision for January 2026, which has some super gorgeous astrology. And last year, January and December were really rough. And so I'm really excited for the collective that we can start the new year in a way that builds momentum and seeds some of our visions, because what a year we've survived and hopefully thrive through. So, yeah, I hope that that's an invitation for you all to do the same, of start bringing gratitude and awareness to what we experienced and what we created and what we brought into reality, our dreams and our fantasies that we want to keep elaborating on, not in some like new year, new me way or setting ourselves up for false starts in January, but really just taking a pause I view it as working with the cycles of nature and taking that pause. It's a time of hibernation. It's been getting really cold here in the Bay Area. I feel like I'm back in New York because it's cold and we don't have the infrastructure out here like we do back in the East Coast. So I was tempted to buy Tim's, but I did go crazy buying myself like grown woman wool socks because that's what we do. We buy vacuums and socks when we're at my age. But yeah, I think that's a good use of this month's astrology is to kind of be reflective, but also really start putting those visions out. And that guides me a little bit. I'm going to jump around, but to this beautiful, well, it's always all these astrology like transits are more complicated, but we have this full moon in Gemini tomorrow, December 4th. And Gemini is a chatty, quick air sign. It is mutable as well. And I have been feeling so chatty. I don't know how you've all been feeling, but I think a good way to work with Gemini transits is always processing, mentally processing, conversationally processing, getting out your journal, um, writing down the things you want to let go of, writing down the things you want to start. I think it's just Gemini energy is really good for spell casting through language. Everyone has a different relationship to language. Some people are highly verbal, other people are not at all, and they prefer to write and be really intentional and take their time. So I can't just do like a general prescription for this full moon, but I do think it's a time to work with language and words, which is a kind of carryover theme from 2 weeks ago when we did our last live and we were talking about languages spell casting. And that is still very much top of mind for me. Now, what makes this full moon in Gemini more nuanced is that it's sitting in an opposition to Venus and Sag and a wider opposition to Mars and Sagittarius. So we're in this kind of conversation between naming our needs in our relationships and owning our desires and putting language to those desires. Sagittarius sometimes is too restless. And, it's a fire sign, it's the centaur, it's the wild horse. So, Sagittarius sometimes it quenches its desires through adventure and through searching the world for the deep existential questions. And Gemini is nudging Sagittarius, or they're in kind of like an interesting conversational dance around when do we need to speak up and put language to the things that we want, to our boundaries, to remembering to like, I think this is something I talk about a lot because I'm not great at remembering it myself, but nobody is a psychic. And so we need to learn through a lot of trial and error how to articulate our inner worlds to the people that we care about so that we can bridge that gap between what we feel inside and how we experience reality through other people. And I think that can be a lifelong learning curve. But Gemini and all of the Geminis in my life give me the best communication advice because also something I've noticed is one of my Gemini best friends is a lot more light and playful when she's sharing her needs with others. And my Scorpio sensibility can be to be a bit either too brief and sharp and penetrating and probing and intense, or too like altogether just not communicating enough. And she reminds me, folks aren't mind readers. I know. I wish they were, I wish they were mind readers, my Scorpio. Um, So I'm trying to give a tangible example, but yeah, my best friend was just, giving me the like she called it unsolicited advice, but I told her it's always desired from her because my Gemini friends, I just feel like have this kind of intuitive sense of how to reach people. But she was saying sometimes when you want someone to love you in a certain way, you can just frame it as that, like, hey, when someone asks me deeper questions, it makes me feel connected, as opposed to pointing out that that person isn't doing that. And so, can they comment on that? Or like basically making someone inadvertently or unconsciously feel evaluated, but based on how you're communicating. And so she has really helped me to just like playfully and like with a lot of levity own what makes me feel good instead of, accidentally making someone else feel inadequate, which is not my intention. But again, that's the thing with language is that sometimes it's not our intention. But if we don't work on how we're saying things or the phrasing or the tone, we don't grow. And more importantly, we don't connect. And I think that's so important is learning that language is a vehicle or vehicle sounds too instrumentalizing, but language is a way for us to cultivate deeper connection with ourselves and with each other. And that's why I think this Gemini full moon is an invitation for us to refine and play with how we communicate. And because it's in an opposition to Venus and Mars, which again are more planets of relating and expressing and owning our desires and how we want to express and how we want to connect, I think it's a great time to take stock of that. And where do we want to be more playful? Where do we want to own things a little bit more? Where do we want to be curious? Like, I think sometimes we're so fixated in this country and culture of getting our needs met. Like, it's almost becoming an obsession. And I think we forget that the point of connection is also curiosity that hopefully gets cultivated reciprocally in the relationships, but bringing curiosity to your connections too. Like, maybe tomorrow could be a great time, or this week, it doesn't have to be tomorrow, to bring curiosity to your friendships and your romantic relationships and your colleagues and the people you do your work with, your family, like, have you asked the people in your life questions? What are the, like, taking a moment to even think about, like, what are things you'd like to know more of about the people in your life? And this is, something that a lot of relationship therapists um, advise couples that have been together or been married for like 20 years is don't assume that the person that you've been married to for 20 years is a completely known entity. That's how we create. It's not even manufacturing mystery, it's true. There are so many things we don't know about ourselves, about the people we love, and bringing that Gemini curiosity is such a love language that I feel like is universal. I think there's so many of us that don't fully resonate with love languages. I think they are really helpful as a tool, as like shorthand to help kind of understand that we're not all oriented the same way. But at the end of the day, I think we all need words of affirmation. We all need, to different degrees, physical touch. We all need quality time. Like, I understand there's maybe like different levels of intensity, but I think for the most part, it's important to be curious and receive curiosity and also give curiosity. And the ways in which we do that can be varied. But I think across the board, it's really important to make the people in your life feel engaged. And I think that's becoming increasingly less and less and less available to everybody. Like, it's something I think about a lot that people don't often feel deeply investigated and seen. And this is something that we all think and talk about all the time, which is we're living in an era of representation where we're getting, these kinds of passive forms of validation on the daily if we're participating in social media, for example. But that's not the same thing as like deep recognition, like mutual recognition, looking at each other in the eyes, reflecting something true back to each other, and really feeling like held and seen and supported and encouraged by another human being in a way that I feel like isn't that doesn't ask or depend on. That's not, what's the word I'm looking for? Not extractive. That's not I don't know. What's the word? Someone help me. Like, you don't feel like, I think sometimes we feel like someone wants something from us, and that puts us on guard because maybe they're complimenting us or they're, engaging us, but we feel like there's a hidden agenda. And I think that to really feel seen, you need to feel like there isn't an agenda and there isn't a motivation other than to spend time and be present and take someone in. And so I think that could be like a really cool invitation for all this Gemini energy is like, how do we bring back that playful curiosity with ourselves and each other? And I think this is something else that I can kind of volunteer is a lot of people in my life have been trying to like reclaim their attention energy away from like romantic fixations or any type of obsessive thinking and pour it back into themselves. And I think that can also be a really powerful way to use this Gemini full moon is like, where have you been overly fixated in your life? And how can you bring back some resourcing through reclaiming that attention towards something you care about and something you're curious about. And I think that's always important to take inventory of is like when we get fixated on something, when we start overthinking, we really shut down and shut off our life force, which is just not a great place to exist from for very long. So for me, like the last 7 or 10 days, like I felt this reanimation of my life force. And I've been the gym that I go to, we just got a new head coach who brought in so much like incredible new energy and intensity. And I've been like cooking all my meals and I have a to-do list of all the ways that I can bring back my energy and focus and life force into building my business and connecting with new clients. And so, how can you also like take inventory of where your attention is going? And there's that phrase that I think is just like one of those general phrases of wisdom that's like wherever you put your attention is where like life grows. And so I think it's good to take inventory of where are you paying attention and how can you examine that or think about that? Like does that feel good putting all your attention in that person or that thing, or do you want to reel it back and distribute it? Because Gemini, again, like all of the mutable signs, we call them double bodied because they're not fixated. They're not the fixed signs. They can be shape shifting. Gemini, most literally, is the twins. So, thinking about being multiple places at once is not foreign for a mutable sign. And it's something that they embrace, of like, like a Gemini is kind of bored by being fixated on or fixated by because they understand something that I think Pisces too is incredible at is going with the flow of life, trusting the flow of life, surrendering to the flow of life, understanding that there's some wisdom outside of logic that when we trust it can become really magical. And I think about this a lot with the timing of how our lives unfold. And when we fixate, we start to get accidentally entitled and we say, this good part of my career, my love life needs to be accelerating and why not? And then you can victimize. And I think when you go to the flow of life, you're more awake and present and available to the conditions where there is more ease in your life and trusting that your time will come. Sometimes life is like, I think oftentimes in life, we don't get everything all at once. And thank goodness, because that would be really overwhelming. So maybe take a moment to think about where are things flowing in your life. Are they flowing in your health and wellness? Are they flowing in your relationship to yourself? Are they flowing in your friendships? Are they flowing in your relationship to your mom? Are they flowing at work? Where is the flow, and how can you trust that flow and feed that flow and nourish that flow? And one of the placements and that's working overtime for all of us is Jupiter transiting where it wants to transit, which is in the sign of Cancer, and it's going to be making these really supportive trines to Saturn and Neptune in Pisces and Mercury in Scorpio. And so there is this cardinal resourcing from Cancer. So I really want you to look at where Cancer falls into your chart and how is that place going to be supporting and resourcing you all month when things get really sticky and stuck and difficult and your reserves of patience start to get tested. Where is that Cancer in your chart that you can lean on so that you don't completely break or crumble, but you can find some softness, some tenderness in it all? Cancer is a very tender sign. For me, Cancer is in my third house of communication, of my siblings. I've been voice noting all day with my sisters, who are definitely two of my biggest cheerleaders. So, thinking about the house Cancer falls in and how you can call upon it this month when things get a little bit tricky. And I do want to talk about some of the trickier astrology. Oh, sorry, I missed something in the chat. I loved Hala's voice notes to herself. Yes. Oh, we should talk about that. Yeah. So in this week's episode, which is one of my favorites, with Halalian, who is a clinical psychologist, is an author, a poet, so many things, a professor, and is truly one of my favorite conversations. I do feel like I say that about every conversation because there's so much that I get from each one. This one's super close to my heart. And Hala is a Leo, Sag rising, Aries moon. So we see all of that like dope fire in her. And we were talking in the conversation about her Leo placements, and she brought such a cool lens to it where she was talking about how she uses voice notes to herself as an alternative to journaling, and how it acts like, as almost like self witness. And I found self witness to be a really helpful mechanism or tool to hold myself lovingly accountable, because if you're not a lot of people in my life don't journal, and so unfortunately they don't really have a memory bank. And when you're not creating kind of an archive, um, you can quickly lose sight of the promises that you've been making yourself that you've either been keeping or betraying. And I find journaling really poignant for that, where you can go back this time last year, and literally look at the promises you were trying to make and the new beginnings you were trying to seed, and you can take an honest kind of assessment of the progress you've made, the ways that you've kind of kept those promises to yourself, or the ways that you've maybe betrayed them. And then you can use that, and not as a moment to shame yourself, but as a moment to ask questions, which is the theme of this entire live, is getting curious, asking questions, and communicating and making new promises and new agreements with yourself. And so, yes, journaling is not the only method. You can make voice notes to yourself, which, as an obviously verbal person, I would love to try doing. I'm curious also, for those of you still here in the chat, if you want to share how this astrology has been feeling for you, and on the eve of this full moon, how you're feeling in your body, in your life. If you're resonating with any of this, are there new agreements or new ways of expressing yourself that you're experimenting with, or that you're excited to experiment with? Started out this year journaling, and then when shit got really uncomfy. Oh, that's a really lovely and real point, that writing on the page can be super confronting. And so it can be a lot easier to journal when you're in quote unquote a good place. Whereas when you're not feeling so great, or when something's uncomfortable, there's something very confronting about writing about it. And I think that's when we also, to get back in our Gemini bag, Geminis and all these mutable signs, again, are not fixed. So they believe in all of the plurality of approaches and modalities. And I think we need to give ourselves full permission to switch it up. I mean, Gemini is like the switch it up sign. It's like, do we need to do walks? And do we need to do, what do we need to do to get through and to feel held? And we can't always be in a processing place. And I think that's something I've really learned and trust now in my life, that you don't always need to be in a place of processing. Sometimes you're in a place of metabolizing, sometimes you're in a place of pure experience. And all of those phases serve a purpose. And integration is not always happening, right? It's something that happens in, like, everything in nature is a cycle, it's cyclical. So sometimes we also have to listen. I think for me though, and this is just subjective, and I'm like a very Scorpio Aries type of person, meaning I'm very intense and probing and investigative about my own self cultivation. And I think one thing about the mutable signs that does concern me at times is sometimes they do rationalize themselves out of accountability. And so I think there is, like, in how you're demonstrating already just from this one message, I can see you're a very self reflective person. And I think sometimes it is important to say, why am I numbing out? Or, like, why am I avoiding confronting something hard? And then working with yourself to figure out what are the tools or what are the ways that make you feel accountable, but also that work for you in that moment. And I think sometimes, definitely in this society, I think people feel more comfortable. Hi, boo. Oh my God. Yes, spring shine. Hi, boo. Um, I think sometimes it's easier to be avoidant. And I've been thinking about avoidance a lot lately and how unhelpful it is. And that comment is unhelpful because we're avoidant for really deep reasons. And I completely understand that. And I think figuring out ways to unstick ourselves is so important, because I don't know if it's on the other side, because it's really not, sometimes the language is really limited in that imagery, because it's not on the other side, it's through. But I think when we really confront and face the things that we've been avoiding, it releases all of this like stuck energy. And we realize like our strength, and we realize, especially if we like learn how to ask for help or the appropriate help, like so much in our life starts to flow again. And so I think my challenge sometimes to mutable signs is like, how is disassociating or constantly moving and being restless or constantly shape shifting, kind of creating the conditions to avoid. And so that is totally the celestial conditions of the moment, like dealing with themes of escapism, which I feel like also come up really big in the holidays because people are confronted with family dynamics. There's a lot of like anxiety and stress that can come up in the, in the final kind of moments of the year, people being really hard on themselves if they didn't achieve their goals, feeling financial stress and pressure with gift giving and like cultural expectations around showing up a certain way for the holidays, being in familial environments that you may or may not want to be in. There's a lot that comes with this time of year. And I think all these Pisces energies in the sky can also, while the beneficial or like beautiful aspects of it are about surrender and going with the flow, I've talked about some of the shadow sides to it are definitely escapism, disassociating. A lot of Pisces placements deal with addiction because they're so sensitive, that it's really hard for them to like hold and face the depth of their sensitivity. So they're definitely prone to like smoking and drinking and any addiction. It can be screen addiction as a way to kind of find an escape route to soften the intensity of what they feel. And so I think those are all just kind of warning signs of maybe some of the things that we might be faced with or we might be tempted to fall into, and to be realistic about it, probably will or might. And then Sagittarius is another sign, that can be super escapist in a completely different way. Sagittarius can rationalize kind of like Aquarius. Um, I find that Sagittariuses can rationalize through intellectualizing, through philosophy. So sometimes you're trying to talk to a Sag and they're, you feel like you're talking suddenly to a know-it-all, and they kind of avoid being vulnerable, and they start telling you about yourself through some type of obfuscation of intellect, and that can feel really um, frustrating. I have a lot of Sages in my life where I'm like, oh my gosh, be more humble, level with me. Or they use humor. Sages also sometimes they use humor as a total mask. And Mercury is going to re-enter Sagittarius, and Mercury struggles in Sagittarius. And that doesn't mean we need to be freaking out about it, but I feel like sometimes Sagittarians rely too heavily on humor, because they can often be uncomfortable with that raw vulnerability, or with like just keeping it. They're really good at keeping it real, but like, are they good at keeping it real in a way that's sensitive? And as an Aries moon, like I love a Sag, and I don't think there's like one right way to communicate. I think all the ways that people communicate in the zodiac are important. And I don't think we always need to be communicating in this like perfect, sensitive way. I certainly don't. But I'm just saying there's definitely some things that we can all like look at in terms of this month's astrology that are like, okay, there might be moments where I blurt something out and it's half baked, and that's fine. As long as I like, kind of double back and clarify for myself or for the other person that like, continued conversation. But yeah, I think that is something that's been really big on my mind. Something that Chris Brennan and Austin Coppock, of the Astrology podcast, were talking about that I found so interesting and cool was thinking about how, and I actually wrote out the dates because I thought it would be fun for you all to do like a kind of exercise of thinking about what you've noticed or what patterns have been playing out. So Mercury first entered Sagittarius in its pre-retrograde shadow on October 21st. Okay, October 21st. Then it started officially stationing retrograde November 9th. Then it slipped back into the sign of Scorpio on the 18th. Then, and this is where OBS will be dope because I'll put it like it'll be a layer here. Then Mercury stationed direct in Scorpio on the 29th of November. where it remains direct until it re-enters Sagittarius and exits its post shadow on December 11th. So this is another cosmic plot afoot. Is what houses do Scorpio and Sagittarius fall in? And have you been having this like review and conversation and coming back and thinking about it more and having more conversations with the places of Scorpio and Sagittarius? And I have, and it is so literal for me. And I think retrogrades are so cool to think about in this way, where there's just these opportunities to circle back and to, with new information or with more additional reflection or discussion, to bring additional levels of clarity and choice and agency into the themes of the house of Sagittarius and Scorpio. So now that Mercury is direct, we should be getting some sense of clarity about the house that Scorpio, the themes of the house of Scorpio. And then we will also be doing the same for Sag starting the 11th. And for me, Sagittarius falls in my eighth. That's also a financial house. So it's contracts. It's another relational house of merging, of intimacy, of shared resources. And Scorpio is in my seventh house of really committed partnerships, contracts, clients. And I've been having so many reflections on those areas of life and literal conversations with different people. And there's been a lot of movement in my podcast and in my own personal life around contracts and growth and negotiation. And so it's been a delight to just continue to live through all of the transits myself and just really see how it's playing out in the lives of others around me. And sometimes when retrogrades happen, it's also just pulling internal focus. So if you're someone who this is not playing out in such a literal way, it's more sometimes a catalyst for that internal reflection on those houses. So for you, LaShawn, as a Leo rising, Scorpio is like housing, belonging. It's really deep. It's like those early messages of how and where we belong, who we want to belong to, our attachment. Like the fourth is like family and legacy and lineage and ancestry. And so the fourth house can also kick up like reflections on how we attach, how we feel, how we forge our deepest bonds, issues of avoidance, issues of like early emotional memory. And then sometimes it's more literal, like fourth house transits can bring up like a desire to move or just fantasies or kind of things like a frenzy around place as it pertains to belonging. So if you all, whenever you drop in the chat your rising sign, I can help you think about. And then for you, LaShawn, for Leo risings, Sagittarius is in the fifth house of true love and fame and pleasure and joy. You know, it's the house of joy. It's a visible house. So when Sagittarius is really active in the sky right now, like if I could show you the ephemeris, there's like so many planets in Sag right now lighting up your fifth. The fifth house is where we date. It's non-committal, like sexiness and pleasure. It's also like our creative projects. And so there's just like a lot of, you know, opportunities to think about what you want and desire in that area of your life. And because it's going to be a lot of the Saturn wide oppositions to this Gemini full moon, it's like, how do you open your throat chakra and claim your desires for these fifth house themes of creativity and romance and pleasure? And how do you want to experience it? Do you want to have self pleasure? Do you want to have pleasure with your friends? Do you want to have pleasure romantically? Like, go nuts. You know, Sag is like a more is more sign. So it's ruled by the planet Jupiter. Like, it's definitely not a sign that holds back. And so I think it's a good time to just go big or go home in whatever themes of the house that Sag sits in our chart. Now, the one kind of big cautionary transit that we're all of us astrologers are discussing, and then I'm probably going to pause there and move into questions because I realize it's 45. It is shocking how I can talk at a camera 45 minutes. I feel like that's maybe like a sign of like some sort of gift and disability intensity. But oh my god, I lost my train of thought roasting myself. That's most Aries moon. Roasting yourself and getting lost in the sauce. Oh, So on Monday, December 8th, Mars, which is in the sign of Sagittarius. So again, I don't know all of your natal charts, so I don't know where Sagittarius is falling. But for one of our listeners, it falls in the fifth house of creative projects, of joy, of romantic, juicy dating, true love, whatever. And then it's squaring Saturn in Pisces, which Pisces for Leo risings is in another love, but also financial house of the eighth house of our shared resources, of intimacy, of merging. And so squares can create a lot of intensity and volatility and action. And sometimes it's not good or bad. Sometimes it's like, I think we fear squares a lot because sometimes squares if you just think about what a square sounds like, it's like whatever this planet and this sign wants is in a tension point with what the other planet needs and wants. So it's just almost like an altercation, a planetary altercation or a planetary point of friction. So but I'm personally, and maybe this is I'm tripping, but I'm personally not as scared when Saturn is in a water sign like Pisces. I think, Mars is the planet that wants what it wants. It's where we fight and fuck and where we're kind of off the chain and it's our lizard brain self. It's not our like most processed self. And Saturn is full stop no. You gotta pay $200 or go to jail. Isn't that the Monopoly rule? So or you can't pass go. You don't go to jail, right? You can't pass the go. Whatever. I haven't played Monopoly in a minute. I actually played in August a bunch. But anyways, Mars wants to go and Saturn stops it. So I think the bigger I'm like falling apart mentally. I think the takeaway here is that on the 8th, there's kind of this transit or energy of like the place we feel super ready. We're like, yes, I want that. I'm ready. I'm ready. We then suddenly get like a not yet. Saturn comes in and is like, hold your horses there, buddy. There's more preparation to do. And that's just kind of like it's a bummer transit, It's like, but I want it now. And Saturn is like, and you're not going to get it now. And that is to give more examples of how this is playing out. Like I have a good friend who recently fell in love, but it's a complicated situation. And it looks like there's going to be many, many steps before they can actually like express the love they have for each other in a more conventional way where it's like open and public and they can really celebrate, the love the way that their heart wants to. And so there's more complicated conditions that have been revealed in the last couple weeks. And so now they have to go into a new mode of thinking about surrender and letting go temporarily and kind of reorienting their expectations around how this is all going to play out. And that can feel, I'm sure, in some moments easy, like, this is true love. I feel patient, love is kind. And then I'm sure there's other moments where it feels like really hard not to victimize and be like, why me? Like, why isn't this happening for me? Why do I have to wait? When is this even going to come together? Maybe that activates a story that you've told yourself about how like everyone else gets the big love story and you don't get it. And why is that? And then you start, being mean to yourself and then hours are going by. That type of energy. Or maybe you're like this close to getting a job and getting the paperwork and signing it and having that first check. And there's some steps that suddenly come up in the next week or two where it's like, it's not a no, but it's a hold on. It's a hurry up and wait. So it's a hurry up and wait. It's a hurry up and wait day on Monday. So I think, we just need to resource ourselves and each of us finds different tools to meet the moment. How do you meet the moment? How do you meet a hurry up and wait moment? I need to work out. I need to just dive into my Mars. My Mars needs to get my Mars needs met, or I'm going to lose my mind. So I suggest for my Aries placements, just roll with the Mars that you don't need other people or life to give you anything. You can give it to yourself on Monday. You can go for that walk. You can go to that class and show up for yourself. You can deadlift. You can go for a run because none of the things that you're going to be doing for yourself require someone else to give it to you. And that to me is a healthy remediation for a Mars square Saturn day. Or others could, sit in meditation, do a gratitude list, that doesn't personally work for me all the time. But yeah, how do you find levity and how do you connect to your deeper why in moments when the timeline keeps getting drawn out? And I had that this year. I did not know about my season 2 renewal until almost July or August. And I had been off air for like 6 to 7 months. And I was in like a hurry up and wait like place mentally and emotionally and somatically of just feeling so anxious. And that taught me so much about how to have an identity outside of even the things that I want most in life. How do I connect to my own sense of worth and my own sense of possibility when that decision is out of my hand? How am I going to generate my why when everyone else who's in control of this one decision is not me? And I got more spiritually yoked, like my meditation, my prayer. I think when I'm not getting my needs, my Aries Scorpio, like I'm not getting that side of myself met by the world, it forces me to get more and more spiritual and connected to the things in life that are not about getting what you want, like life is not about that ultimately. And I think that the first half of 2025 really taught me that. And then I lived that in the second half of 2025 by relating to the things that I did want and I got in a completely different way, where you're not clinging desperately, where you're grateful and you're so present when life is going your way because that's not forever. It's like the wheel, the karmic wheel, and everyone takes a turn. No one is exempt. The wheel's going to go up and the wheel's going to go down for all of us in perpetuity until we change forms and transition into a new form. And so you got to celebrate when your friends and loved ones are on the up, and you got to be there when they're on their way down. And the timing of it is such that you could be on your way down when your best friend or your lover is on their way up. And that's just the humor and absurdity of life. And it's humbling because, and my thing is, I always peep when people rather commiserate with other people than celebrate their ups or the reverse. But to me, you got to celebrate the whole journey of yourself and your loved ones. That to me is being a real friend. Like when you sense someone's encouragement and love is more unconditional for you, you can always sense that their love for themselves is more unconditional. And when I sense that someone can only love me when I'm down, it lets me know that that's how they treat themselves and that's how they relate to themselves. And that's how I give and cultivate empathy for folks because I know that's probably a reflection of how they were raised, that the people who raised them didn't make them feel worthy of love and affection and respect unconditionally. And a lot of people were raised in conditional households. Like, I will love you if you get an A. I will love you if you go to Harvard. I will love you if you become an engineer. I will love you if you only talk like this or show up like that. I will love you if you reject your authentic expression of who you honestly are to please me and my own anxieties of how we need to be perceived by the world, which is also very real for, new immigrants to this country and people who are regularly policed, by white society and how they show up. And there's real, not imagined consequences for that. However, as adults, we need to reclaim those parts of ourselves that, from childhood, straight up. And if we don't do that, it reflects in how we show up and how we love or don't love other people and ourselves. And that is something as an adult I've been so aware of is like the ways in which people have not been loved on throughout their life. And so they don't actually know intuitively how to show love because it wasn't given to them. And so we do need to give each other grace and also those of us who were loved more conditionally or taught ourselves that or healed that or healing that because we're never healed, um, the answer is always to spread more love. That's always the answer. Like, the answer is to just keep the love train going. And the way that I've learned how to do this is, like, I know who holds me down, like, my closest tribe of people and loved ones, they all know how to give me that love and reciprocate that love. So I'm good. I pour into myself first and foremost, and then I have my tribe that pours into me because they pour into themselves. But I have other extra love to spare. And I spread that love whether I get it back or not, because that's not the point. The point is to, like, raise the vibration, raise the frequency, give love and spread love to those who that is just was not a given. And I think the best way to raise the whole vibration of what we're living in is just, if you have extra to give more, and hopefully that is the Saturn, Neptune, and Pisces vibe of this month is, and the Jupiter and Cancer of it all is like, we need to be caretaking for the collective. And that's always, part and parcel of taking care of ourselves. And, one day I'm going to go on a Sag philosophy rant about what is the self. There is really no discrete self. The self is still constituted through community and through ancestors and through the stars and the planets and the cosmos. And so when we say, self care, we're still talking about collective care because the collective is held within the self and vice versa. It's like the fractal principle. And so when I talk about self-care, I'm still framing it within collective care. And that's the Sag word of the day. This is how Sag philosophy actually be spin because it's true. They're like the philosophy signs, like Sag and Pisces. I feel like I'm channeling right now because this is like how they all talk. But yes, tomorrow, Gemini full moon. And now I'm going to answer a few questions. I don't know how the frick it's 5:57. I might not get to all these, but maybe I can try and answer them succinctly. Okay, this was the first question I got. Shout out to my girl for this question because I loved it. Is there a full moon ritual for letting go of the BS but making it playful because Gemini? And yes, it's a Gemini full moon, it's not a Cancer full moon, so it's mischievous. It's the trickster energy, we don't need to cry to let go. Though crying is important, and I do advise Geminis to cry more because you can make it dramatic and funny and, clear space through clarity and humor and journaling, but sometimes I feel like y'all actually do need a good cry. But I do think for the Gemini full moon, letting all of it go can be literal, like making a list of all that BS that you're done with and then writing it out, writing out those outdated stories, those assumptions, writing it out in a way that's like very Gemini. Like you can almost write it like a headline or like a ridiculous story and be dramatic, like embrace it, read it out loud, use voices and accents, just like get into it. And then instead of burning it, which I feel like is very Scorpio, just like tearing it up like it's confetti and just tossing in the air and making it a party. Because I feel like we were talking about Scorpio moon and how it's more like composting and kind of accessing that intensity and like candlelight. And I feel like Gemini is like a dance party and you're just like throwing it up in the air. You're remembering that there is a new day, put your gospel music on, maybe encourage yourself. One of my favorite tunes. Gospel music's a little Aries, but Aries and Geminis are thick as thieves because of this. Because sometimes Aries and Geminis, we don't have the highest bandwidth for wallowing because we want to feel lit again. That's why me and Geminis, we can definitely encourage the most avoidance with each other because we're both like, we want to go straight to it's all good, So you can lean into that and just throw your woes a party, throw all the BS a party. It doesn't even need to be like grief, But if that speaks to you, that's cool. Maybe Gemini's in your eighth house. Again, I need to know what your rising sign is. But I think because it is a Gemini full moon, I do think it's helpful to like write things out, tear them up, get like get physicalize things. Like, I think people keep things so in their head, and I don't think that's helpful, especially when you're trying to release something. Just write it and rip it and give your body some, like, sensation, you know? I feel like we just sit around and scroll. It's like, don't do that. We wanna feel lit again. I've been saying the word lit a lot like I'm a freaking 19-year-old, but I get so frustrated when things aren't lit because I have an Aries moon. Just like when people aren't asking me on like to do fun things or the conversation's kind of super dull, like I just get frustrated. That's just a me thing. But I've been holding myself accountable and I'm like, life isn't boring. You're boring. What are you doing to make sure that your cup is full? So I've been kind of flipping the script and like taking myself on dates and trying this new trainer at this gym. I've just been trying to take accountability. Um, okay, the next two questions. Spotify rap showing up and out for the gem full moon. What's on your list? My Spotify Wrapped is consistently embarrassing because I am not diverse, it turns out, in my music taste, which I've known since I was a child. I listen to R&B, and so that's what's on my Spotify Wrapped. Isaiah Huron is so good. Isaiah spelled ISA, so my name is in it. IAHURON. He's next. I was gonna say he's my Leon Thomas, but I hate that because like I love both of them, and Leon is Leon, and I'm gonna see Leon on December 19th in Oakland with Ombre. Amber? I don't know, but I love her and I listen to her all the time. Destin Conrad, who I just saw, so prolific. I want Destin on the show so bad. Destin is very young and played what felt like a 2-hour set. And I was just in my head, like, as a 39-year-old woman, how is this young man so prolific? He has written so many songs, but it turns out one of his co-writers from Jump has been Matt Keane, shout out Mac from Los Angeles, who's in the Joyce Rice crew, who's an incredible singer-songwriter who I've loved for many years and taken many a homie to see live in Los Angeles from the Bay Area, making it happen. Support your singer-songwriters. Shout out Matt Keane, a Scorpio. And Destin's a Cancer, Scorpio Cancer, so cute. And then, there's some really embarrassing things on my Spotify rap that there might be a Bow Wow song, which was shocking. And I was like, I disagree. I disagree that there shouldn't be a. And then another person I want to shout out is this singer, James Savage and Kamari. Those are my guys. Kamari just came to the Bay and was sold out, and I was so sad. That's what's on my Spotify rap, y'all. I'm an R&B girl, and I will be for life. And unfortunately, Spotify rap does not let me hide. It's just like, this is what you listen to on repeat. So, and it's so Scorpio stellium in the 7th. It's so on the nose. Okay. I think I'm going to leave it there because I also got a question about how to work with this Gemini full moon. And I think I went in on that and I don't want to go and bore y'all. And I have a little non-alcoholic libation here because I can't really drink alcohol like that. So I'm really into because I'm a Taurus rising and I'm bougie. I've been really into my shrubs. So this is a shrub with like persimmons and blood orange and ginger with a little sparkling water. And when I really want to get fancy, I do like muddled fruit. Okay. And that's another cute way to work with a full moon, right? Just like I think making rituals romantic really works for me. But I'm a romantic person. I like romancing myself. Like it looks like I'm on a date perpetually at the crib. And it works for me, y'all. That was really fun as always, and I felt super brain dead and cooked before this, and then I came alive because I love all of you, and it's just so fun. So please leave a comment. Leave a comment. Leave a comment. Okay, get it. Whoa for the metal fruit. I know. That's extracurricular, but I've been going every single Saturday to my local farmer's market, which is very lit, and the produce and the fruit are incredible, and so it just elevates my game. But anyway, leave a comment, tell me how you're feeling, Gemini full moon. I wanna hear from my mutables. What's up with this Mars square Saturn? How do each of you handle hurry up and wait energy? What are your antidotes and your spells that you're casting? Write them in the chat. For real, listen to this week's episode with Hala Alian. Next week, we have Mal Wright. Mal! Mal's I think that might be one of my best friends now. Mal Wright. That's next week. I can't wait. Virgo, Capricorn, and Scorpio in the big three. It's going down. And I'm really excited for the episode as well. And please, again, subscribe, like, leave a comment, engage. It means the world to me. Sometimes when you're podcasting, you're just trying to keep the conversation going and hear from the listeners, and that is you all. So please pour into me, let me know how all the conversations are landing. If you're resonating with something, if you're confused about something, I want to hear it all. And feel free to also drop in questions about December astrology or anything that I said that I can clarify. And lastly, I'm working on my website and it's already at a good place. So it's isanaka.com/astrology. And you can find out my methodology. You can book. I'm still working on my Stripe integration, but you can definitely pay on PayPal. And yeah, I'm getting it figured out and it's exciting. And then go check out my personal and Stars and Stars Instagram and peep my new bio for all of not bio, I keep saying bio, the link tree thing. Look at that. You know, there's a lot. There's a lot of Gemini stuff that I've been working on. I love y'all. I'll see you next week for another Wednesday live on Futuro Media answering your cosmic questions. And I'm out. Have a good night, y'all, and have a great Gemini full moon. Peace.